Hi everyone, this is Dave with Return of the Vintage. Welcome back to the channel. For those that are new, I am a reseller of vintage and antique items on eBay. And today what I wanted to do is to go over some questions. Actually, I'd reached out to my viewers to ask if there were any questions regarding reselling, getting started in reselling. And I got a lot of great questions, but I have 10 that I wanted to go over with you. Today, I'm going to go through the first five and appreciate any comments or feedback as we get going. So the first was a common question that comes up pretty often, which is where do you find your best items? This came from Tom. So for me, my best items that I tend to find are estate sales, yard sales, some local auctions, and collections. For me, I'd say I probably do more of the collections now than I had done in the past. The collections are always great to find. Usually I'll find them on like Facebook Marketplace, or I'll reach out to people that I know in my network. I like the collections because people are trying to get rid of them. I can piece out individual toys or individual items from those larger collections, and they're trying to get rid of a lot of stuff, whereas I can sell them individually, and I can usually make my money 2 times, 3 times back much easier through those collections. But I'd say yard sales and estate sales as well is where I get most of my items. The second question came from Paul. Where do you sell your items? So as I'd mentioned, I am primarily on eBay. I know there's other websites, other options. I think there's like Mercari, like Dibdit, all different platforms, lots of new platforms, even Whatnot is kind of like a quicker option. But for me, eBay is my main platform. I just think for me, and I've never tried the others, but I think the others are maybe more suited for newer items, not necessarily vintage or antiques. For me, eBay just has such a large audience, and those that are really my core audience, which are those that are looking for vintage and antiques. And so I think that's my number one resource. The other, I'd say sometimes I'll sell on Facebook Marketplace locally, and I'll do that sometimes if it's a larger item, something I don't necessarily want to ship, or something. I live here in New England. Sometimes there's items that I like tend to sell better, like sports cards, vintage sports cards, tend to get a better local audience for those than I would online for whatever reason. So those are my two main platforms, and those that I would encourage others to use. So the next one came in from Melissa. It says, I'm thinking about starting reselling. What's the first part of advice? So I would say, so for someone that's just getting started, I'd say what I call try before you buy. So if you've never done it before, what I would do is recommend looking around the house and finding something that you could sell that you know has value, as opposed to going out and finding buying collections or buying things that you think will work, because you never know. It may not be necessarily what you want to do. Whereas if you look and you find something and you sell it that you know the value of, it gives you a chance to experiment with the process. It gives you a way to go about the process with eBay and the shipping, all of it from start to finish with something that you're familiar with. So for me, like I had gotten started, I like hats, as you may see from my videos. And I had a couple duplicate hats. I knew what they were worth. So it was easy for me to go and put them online, knowing about the value. I kind of dropped the value a little bit just because it was a used hat. But it was a chance for me to experiment with the process and see if I liked it, which ended up being something I did enjoy. But I would definitely encourage doing that rather than going out, spending a lot of money and maybe not liking it, and maybe not liking the process, and then you're down a lot of money, and you also have a lot of inventory you don't necessarily need or know what to do with. Number four, how is this, and this is from Jeffrey, how do you know something is worth buying? So for me, and it's going to take time for anybody, but for me, it really did take time to research. And over time, the more that you see things, the more that you learn the value and what it would be worth, and if it's even worth selling. But for me, when I first got started, I would go to eBay, and it's still something I do to this day, but I would check sold listings. So if I found it, a GI Joe vintage toy, and I wasn't sure how much it would sell for, I would go on eBay, look at how much. Initially, actually, I looked how much it was selling for, and I thought that's what it was going to cost, but that's not the case. What you want to do is look for what's sold and how much they sold for to give you a sense of the market. Sometimes if it's a rare item, you can look back further and you can see that maybe it's not available or hasn't sold recently, but sold a year ago or 2 years ago at this amount. But for me, that's how I got started, was looking through to see how much things sold for, and that gave me a sense of how much it'd be worth. But I would say that you also eventually need to get to sell-through rate. You know, after that first time of doing your research, you start to then get an understanding of what sell-through rate is if something's going to sell. You know, if there's something that is listed 500 times, but only sold, you know, 25 times, that's a pretty poor sell-through rate, and it shows it's not necessarily worth the purchase. So for me, that's how I got started, was really doing my individual my research on sold items, currently listed items. But I would say, as you go over time, I've been doing this now for about 3 years, the more that you do and the more reps, ultimately, the better you will be at understanding if something's worth selling, and then also if it's worth selling, how much to sell it for. So number 5 today, maybe it's a little bit controversial, I guess. It maybe not. This came from David. Do you watch other resellers on YouTube? So good question. So I do. I would say though that I watched them a lot more earlier on when I was getting started. Now I'll watch maybe from like an entertainment standpoint from time to time. But when I first got started, it was really helpful because I was flying by the seat of my pants. I didn't necessarily know how to do the process, and they were good guides as to this is how you do things from start to finish. I think where I started to maybe lean away from them is that for the most part, I see resellers, and the ones I tend to watch, they're reselling items that maybe are newer items, or items that maybe wouldn't be as attractive or on brand for me. So I don't necessarily see as much of the vintage or the antique items. So I do take that with a grain of salt to say, okay, maybe some of these strategies that they're sharing are beneficial to them, but not necessarily to me. So I would certainly encourage those. And for me, the ones I tend to watch the most are Justin Resells, Commonwealth Picker, and those are, I think, probably the 2 biggest ones that I've watched in the past, the ones that I'll watch now. But I would say that it's very beneficial, and I support others that do what I do too. At your very getting started, obviously I've got a kind of a catalog of ideas and that I share to help with someone that's getting started. But I think for anyone that's getting started, it's good to go and to research other YouTube resellers to provide guidance. But you know, if you're going to be specifically in vintage and antiques, I would just kind of understand maybe how they do things, and maybe isn't necessarily what's going to be as beneficial to how I do things, and maybe how you do things as a vintage or antique reseller. So I hope that's helpful. I'm going to be doing another video shortly. That's going to be the next 5 questions out of my top 10 questions. And I'm also going to be putting a listing here. I'm doing, so I did get a lot of requests for people to take a look at their eBay stores and share feedback in regards to what I see, maybe some areas of improvement for people that are getting started. So what I'm going to start doing is every month I'm going to offer the first 5 people that reach out and ask for support. I'll do a free review, and then I'll email some ideas that might help. So I'm going to put a link here, and I'll put a note in the description as well. Again, free, but maybe hopefully beyond some of the tips that I offer on YouTube, I can offer some suggestions to those getting started with a quick look and a follow-up. So appreciate you taking some time to follow. Next time, if you want to jump onto my next video, you can see the next 5 questions that I picked out of the top 10. But again, appreciate a follow, appreciate a like, and thank you for stopping by with Return to the Vintage.